Of the 10,000 worlds I have catalogued in my long service to the conquered, only one entry carries a correction made in my own hand, not a clerk's hand, not a recorder's, mine. I have erased it, rewritten it, and erased it again more times than any archivist before me has touched a single line. And I will tell you now, before you have any reason to believe me, that the entry concerns a length of folded metal no longer than my forearm, and a human child who was 11 of her planet's years old, and 17 seconds during which I forgot how to do the one thing my species has never failed to do, which is measure. I want you to hold that number. 17 seconds. I will return to it. I always return to it. That is the trouble with this particular memory. It does not lie flat in the archive the way the others do. It loops. It pulses. I begin to file it away and find myself standing again in that observation chamber with the cold light on the walls, watching a girl raise a weapon we had already declared worthless. And I have to start the whole account over from the beginning, because the beginning is the only place where I still believed I understood the universe. So I will start where the conquered started, with the laughter. The humans had been brought aboard the assessment vessel under the protocol we used for all candidate species, which is to say, they did not know they were being assessed. They believed they were attending a meeting. We had told them it was a cultural exchange, an exhibition of mutual heritage, a gesture of goodwill between the conquered and the small, loud world that had begun flinging radio noise into the dark a century earlier. The humans, being humans, had taken the word asterisk exhibition and run with it past all reason. They arrived with crates. They arrived with paintings rolled in cloth and instruments that made sound and a wheel of fermented animal secretion they called cheese, which they insisted we taste, and which the overseer described in her report as a deliberate biological assault. What they did not know was the shape of the room behind the room. The exhibition hall was real, but one deck below it, behind glass that showed our side as mirror and theirs as window, sat the tribunal of reckoning, and the tribunal had already mostly made up its mind. I should explain what the tribunal does, because it is the hinge on which all of this turns, and because if you do not understand it, you will think the humans were simply being shown a museum. They were not. The conquered does not conquer. We do not invade. We have outlived 100 species that did, and we learned in the cold, patient way that only very old civilizations learn, that the cheapest war is the one you prevent by never letting it be born. So when a young species starts to reach outward, we go and we look at it and we decide one of three things. We decide it is an asset and we cultivate it. We decide it is inert and we leave it alone behind a quiet wall of discouraged trade routes until it forgets we exist. Or we decide it is a threat, a species whose violence outpaces its wisdom, a species that will, given the stars, do to others what it has done to itself, and for those the wall is not quiet. For those the wall is permanent. A threat species is sealed inside its own system. No expansion, no contact, no appeal. We do not destroy them. We simply make certain that whatever they become it alone forever, where they can harm no one but each other. Humanity, on the day they came aboard with their cheese and their paintings, was 3 votes from threat. You may ask how we measure such a thing, and the answer is that we measure everything, and we are very good at it. We had their wars. We had every conflict their species had recorded, plotted against their technological growth, and the curve frightened us. A species that learns to split the atom and within a single lifetime points the result at its own cities. A species whose tools of survival and tools of slaughter advance in perfect lockstep, as though they cannot conceive of building one without building the other. We had charts. We had simulations. We had, above all, their weapons, and weapons are how the conquered reads the soul of a young world, because a being will lie with its mouth and tell the truth with the thing it makes to defend itself. So we asked them through the diplomats to bring something. Not their greatest weapon, we did not want their bombs. We had measured those from orbit and found them tediously predictable. We asked, with the careful innocence of a tribunal that already knew its verdict, for an object that their species considered noble, a weapon they were proud of, a weapon they would call beautiful. We expected this to damn them. A species that finds beauty in killing is a species you do not let out of its cage. They brought the sword. Her name was May, and she was holding her grandfather's hand when the doors opened. And the first thing I recorded about her, I still have the recording, I have watched it more times than is healthy for an archivist, is that she was not looking at us. Every adult in that delegation looked at us. They could not help it. We are not shaped the way they are shaped, and the body knows fear before the mind decides to be polite. The diplomats looked at us. The scientists looked at us. The girl looked at the floor, and then at the lights, and then at a seam in the wall where two panels met imperfectly, and she frowned at the imperfect seam the way a person frowns at a thing that personally disappoints them. And then she looked up at her grandfather and said something in their language that the translators caught and logged, and that I did not understand the importance of for another 9 days. She said, "Grandpa, they built this whole ship and they couldn't make the wall straight." The old man Gyro, the records named him, Gyro Tanaka, 81 years of their counting, a swordsmith by trade though he had not lit his forge in a long time. The old man squeezed her hand and said nothing, but I saw the corner of his mouth move, and I logged that too, without knowing why. The sword sat on a stand of pale wood in the center of the exhibition hall, and the humans treated it the way you treat a sleeping elder. They did not crowd it. The diplomats spoke around it in low voices. When the overseer entered in her formal carapace and the room went still, it was Gyro who stepped forward, slow, one hand on a cane, and he bowed to the sword before he bowed to her, and several of my colleagues recorded that as evidence of primitive object worship. And I, fool that I was then, agreed with them. The overseer asked him to present it. This was the moment the tribunal had been waiting for. The cameras behind the mirror tightened their focus. Below us, the vote stones sat in their cradles, 3 of them already darkened toward the color we used for threat. Gyro Tanaka lifted the sword from its stand with both hands and held it flat across his palms, and he spoke, and I will give you his words as cleanly as the translators gave them to us, because I have never forgotten them. "This blade," he said, "has never killed." The overseer waited. We all waited. We were waiting for the rest of the sentence, the part where the human explains that it could kill, that it has killed enemies that it is capable of glorious slaughter, the boast we had measured in 100 young species before this one. We were waiting to write the word and seal the wall. It did not come. It was made by my hands, Gyro went on, from iron I folded for 2 years. It was made to be the last sword I ever forged. It has never been drawn against a living thing, and if I have done my work, it never will be. I brought it to you because you asked for the most beautiful weapon we own, and this is mine, and the most beautiful thing about it is that it has kept its promise. There was a silence in the tribunal that I can only describe as confusion, which for the conquered is a kind of injury. And then a junior officer of the assessment crew, Vire, a careful and ambitious creature whom I have since stopped speaking to, leaned to the glass and made the sound our species makes that the humans would later, accurately, call a laugh. A weapon that has never been used. A warrior who is proud his blade is clean. To Vire, to most of us, this was not nobility. This was failure dressed as virtue. This was a species so confused that it built a killing tool, and then congratulated itself for being too cowardly to kill with it. Vire spoke, and the translators carried it into the hall, and I think Vire meant it to be heard, because Vire was the sort to perform contempt for an audience. "Then it is useless," Vire said. "A blade that cannot cut its enemy is not a weapon, it is a decoration. You have brought us a child's idea of strength." I watched the old man's face. I expected anger. Anger we understood. Anger we could measure. The curve of human violence lived in the jaw, and I watched his jaw, waiting for it to tighten so I could log the confirmation. It did not tighten. He looked, if anything, tired. He set the sword back on its stand with the same slow care, and he said, very quietly, "You are right that it cannot cut your armor. You are right that it would lose to your weapons. I am an old man, and I am not going to argue with people who have crossed the stars to tell me my life's work is a decoration." And then the child let go of her grandfather's hand and stepped forward into the light, and she looked directly at the mirror, directly at us, though she could not have known we were there, though the glass should have shown her nothing but her own small reflection, and she said, in a voice that did not shake, "Can I show you the truth? I told you I would return to the 17 seconds, and I will, but the 17 seconds make no sense without the 2 years, and the 2 years belong to the old man, so let me give you the old man first." We learned his history the way we learn everything, which is thoroughly and without permission. Jiro Tanaka had not always been a maker of swords that never killed. As a very young man, in a war his country lost, he had been a maker of swords that did. He had worked in a place where blades were turned out fast and cheap and sharp for hands that would carry them into a green and screaming jungle, and he had been good at it, and he had been proud of it, and he had sent thousands of edges out into the world without once asking what they came home wet with. He was, in those years, exactly the kind of human the conquered measures and fears, a craftsman of harm who slept well. The war ended the way that particular war ended, and the men who carried his blades did not, most of them, come home, and one who did come home was his older brother, and his older brother came home wrong in the way that war breaks a person from the inside out where no medic can reach. And one evening in the small house they shared, the brother took down one of Jiro's own blades, a fast, cheap, beautiful thing, Jiro's own work, his own edge, folded by his own hands, and he used it on himself, and Jiro found him. I am telling you this plainly because the humans do not flinch from it, and neither will I. The boy who measured the sword as a decoration would have found nothing in this story to measure. There is no enemy in it. There is no battle. There is only a man and his grief and a length of metal that did exactly what metal does, which is whatever the hand demands of it. Jiro did not light his forge for 11 years after that, and when he lit it again, he was a different smith. He had decided, and this is the part the conquered had no column for, no chart, no stone in any color. He had decided that he would spend the rest of his life learning to make a blade so perfectly that it would never need to be used. Not a blade too dull to cut. A blade so sharp, so balanced, so true, that the person who carried it would feel the weight of all that work in their hand and understand, in their bones, that a thing made with this much care is not a thing you spend on rage. He wanted to forge restraint into steel. He wanted to make a weapon whose entire argument was do not. It took him 40 years to believe he had done it. The sword on the pail would stand was the result. 2 years of folding for that single blade, layer over layer over layer, until the metal held more foldings than there were stars in the small patch of sky he could see from his shop. He had made it for no one. He had made it as a letter to his brother that his brother would never read. And he had never, not once, allowed it to taste anything but air and oil and the soft cloth he cleaned it with, because the moment it cut a living thing it would stop being the letter and become, again, just a sword, and he could not bear to write that ending. The girl had grown up in that shop. She had grown up watching her grandfather clean a blade he would not use, and she had asked him once. We have this from a later conversation, recorded without their knowledge, and I am not proud of how we came to have it, but I am glad we do. She had asked him, "Grandpa, why make a sword you'll never fight with?" And the old man had said, "Because the hardest thing in the world, May, is to be strong enough to destroy something and choose every single day not to. A weak person who doesn't fight is just weak. A strong person who doesn't fight, that's the whole thing. That's everything. The sword is so you remember you're strong. The not fighting is so you remember you're good." She was 9 when he told her that. She was 11 when she stood in our exhibition hall and asked to show us the truth. And what none of us behind the glass understood yet was that she had been preparing the answer to Vyer's contempt for 2 of her short years, because she had been listening to her grandfather her whole life. The overseer, against the recommendation of 3 of her officers, allowed the demonstration. I have wondered in the long time since why she allowed it. I think, and the overseer is gone now and cannot correct me, I think she allowed it because she was old, like the smith was old, and old things recognize each other. I think when Jiro Tanaka said, the most beautiful thing about it is that it has kept its promise asterisk, something in the overseer's ancient and weary mind sat up and paid attention in a way the charts could not account for. She did not believe him, but she wanted to, and the wanting was enough to buy the child her 17 seconds. What happened first was an argument among the humans, brief and fierce and quiet, the grandfather shaking his head, the girl insisting, the diplomats caught between them. I could not hear all of it, but I heard the end of it, when the old man finally stopped arguing and put both his hands on the girl's shoulders and looked at her for a long moment, and then said something that the translator marked as uncertain, a phrase it could render 2 ways. It rendered it first as asterisk do not embarrass me. Then it corrected itself, with the little flag it used when it was unsure, and rendered it as asterisk do not lose yourself. I have come to believe the second rendering was correct, because of what she did, and because of what she did not do. Then Jiro Tanaka did a thing I did not understand and have spent years coming to understand. He took a strip of black cloth from inside his coat. He had brought it. He had known. Somehow the old man had known this moment might come, and he tied it over the child's eyes. Vyer laughed again. The fool. Even then, with the thing about to happen, Vyer laughed. The humans, working quickly, set up what the girl asked for. They did not ask us for a target. This is the detail that I keep returning to, the detail that loops in me like a wound that will not close. We had expected, if there was to be any demonstration at all, that they would ask for something to destroy. A block of metal, a simulated foe, something to cut so that we could measure the cut, so that we could write the number and seal the verdict. That is what a weapon is, asterisk for asterisk. That is the only question we knew how to ask of it. The girl did not ask for something to destroy. She asked for something to protect. They brought from one of the human crates a small living thing. The records called it a finch, a bird, brown and gray and absurdly small, with a heartbeat we could see fluttering in its throat from across the room. They set it on a low perch in the open center of the hall. And then above it, suspended from a fine thread, they hung a single sheet of their paper, old paper, the kind the smith used to wrap blades, thin as breath, and they hung it so that it draped down over the little bird like a roof, like a tent, the bottom edge of the paper hanging just at the level of the bird's fragile back. And the girl, blindfolded with her grandfather's blade in her 2 small hands, was asked by no one and told by no one, and simply understood that the task she had set herself was this: to cut the paper, and only the paper in the dark, with a blade that could open a body like water, a finger's width above a living heartbeat she could not see. Now I will give you the 17 seconds, because I have circled them long enough, and because you have earned them, and because I cannot keep them in the archive any other way except by telling them again. She was still. That was the first second and the second and the third. She held the sword low and angled, the way the old man had shown her 10,000 times, and she breathed. And we measured the breath because measuring is what we do, and her heartbeat was, I want to be precise, I owe this to her. Her heartbeat was slower than it had been when she walked into the room. A child, blindfolded, holding a blade above a living thing she could not see, on an alien vessel, in front of creatures she had every reason to fear, and her heart slowed. We had no column for that either. We have since added one. The 4th second, the 5th. The hall was silent in the way only a room full of the conquered can be silent, which is completely, because we do not fidget and we do not breathe loudly, and we had all, every one of us behind that glass, stopped pretending to take notes. The vote stones sat forgotten in their cradles. She turned her head very slightly, the way you do when you are listening rather than looking. And I understood then too late, a beat too late, the way I understood everything about that day, that she was not blind at all. She was using the blindfold the way her grandfather had taught her to use it, to take away the one sense that lies most easily, so that the others could tell the truth. She could hear the bird, the tiny shifting of its feet on the perch. She could feel the air the paper displaced as it hung. She knew, in the dark, exactly where the line was between the thing she could harm and the thing she would not. The 10th second, the 11th. And then she moved, and I cannot tell you it was fast, though it was, and I cannot tell you it was slow, though it felt slow. The way a thing you will remember forever stretches itself out so that you can. The blade came up and across in a single line, one clean, unhurried arc, and there was a sound. There is always a sound. This is the sound I cannot get out of the archive of myself. A sound like a breath being released, the softest possible parting, and the sheet of paper fell. It fell in two pieces, cut clean across the middle, the upper half drifting one way, the lower half the other, two pale wings settling to the floor on either side of the perch. And the bird did not move. The bird did not so much as ruffle. It sat on its perch under the place where the paper had been, its heart fluttering in its throat, entirely unharmed, entirely unaware that anything had passed close enough to end it. And the girl stood over it with the blade already arcing back down, already coming to rest. And then came the 17th second. And this is the second that I erased and rewrote more than all the others, because the demonstration was over. The paper was cut. The point, if the point was asterisk the human child can cut precisely, had been made. Any of us would have stopped there. The smart thing, the measured thing, the thing that proves your skill, was to hold the blade up and let us admire the edge. She did not hold it up. She knelt. In one motion, blindfold still on, she went down on one knee beside the perch, and she set the sword on the floor in front of her, edge turned away from the bird, edge turned away from us. And she put her two small, empty hands flat on her thighs, and she lowered her head. To the bird. To the small brown nothing of a creature she had just spared. She bowed to the thing she had chosen not to harm, the way her grandfather had bowed to the blade before he bowed to the overseer, and she stayed down there, head lowered, hands empty, the sword on the floor between her and a room full of beings who could have ended her without rising from their seats. And in the dark behind her eyes she said, quietly, "Not for us. Not for the tribunal, I think truly not for anyone, but the old man and the brother he had lost and the bird and herself," she said. "That's the truth. Anyone can cut. The sword isn't for cutting. The sword is for being able to and not." I want to describe to you what happened in the tribunal in that moment, but I find that the words my species uses for our own experience are inadequate, and so I will borrow from the humans, who are better at this than we are, who have always been better at this than we are, which is the entire lesson and the only one that matters. We were ashamed. It moved through that chamber like a temperature. Every one of us had walked into that day certain we were the elder species, the wise ones, the ones who had outgrown the curve of violence that we had come to judge in this loud young world. We measured weapons because we believed weapons told the truth about a soul, and we were not wrong about that. We were only wrong about which truth. We had brought them here believing that the proof of a species' danger was the lethality of the thing it made, and a child had knelt on our floor with a blade sharp enough to part a heartbeat from its body, and had used all of that lethality, all of it, every folded layer of those 2 patient years to do nothing, to protect, to prove that she could asterisk, and to choose, in front of us in the dark, not to. She had taken the most dangerous thing in the room and made it into a vow. Vire was not laughing. It was the overseer who spoke first, and she did not speak to her officers, and she did not speak to the tribunal. She rose from her place, and the overseer did not rise, not for anyone. Her age and rank had earned her the right to remain seated before kings. She rose, and she crossed to the glass, and she touched the panel that turned the mirror clear, so that for the first time the humans could see the room behind the room, the row of pale watching shapes, the cradles, the stones. The diplomats startled. The scientists went rigid with the understanding of what they had not been told. But the girl, who could not see any of it, who was still kneeling with the blindfold over her eyes and her hands empty on her thighs, simply lifted her head a little toward the new sound of the panel and waited. And the overseer said, in the formal cadence we use only for the recording of verdicts, the cadence that cannot be taken back, "The assessment is concluded." Below, in their cradles, the 3 stones that had darkened toward threat were lifted out by the clerk and set aside. And the overseer was handed the case in which the verdict stones were kept, and she looked into it for a long moment. And then she did a thing that had never been done in the history of the Tribunal of Reckoning, a thing for which there was no procedure, a thing I had to invent a new line in the archive to even record. She closed the case without taking a stone, none of the 3, not asset, not inert, not threat. "We have no stone for this," she said. "We will make one." This is the part where, if I were a human, I would tell you that everything was different after that the wall was never built, that humanity walked out into the stars as friends of the conquered and all was well. And the first 2 of those are true. The wall was never built. The vote was never sealed. And in the years since, the loud young world has done what young worlds do, which is to disappoint us and astonish us in roughly equal measure. And we have let them, because we decided, because a child decided for us, that a species capable of forging restraint into steel was a species worth the risk of the open dark. But I did not say all was well, and I will not, because the truest part of this account is also the part that costs me the most to write, and I have been circling it the way I circle everything that day, and I am tired of circling, so here it is. The overseer made the new stone. She had it cut from the floor of the exhibition hall itself, from the very deck where the girl had knelt, and she had it carved with a single mark, and the mark was not a word in our language because our language had no word. The mark was a small line, slightly curved, the shape, though I do not think the carver knew it. I think the overseer's hand guided it without her knowing, the shape of a blade at rest. A blade sheathed. A blade being able to and not. And then the overseer asked the humans for one thing, not the sword. We did not take the sword. The old man would have given it, I believe, but the overseer would not let us ask, because she understood by then that the sword's whole meaning was that it stayed with the one who had promised. We asked for nothing we could measure. We asked for nothing we could hold. We asked them to teach us the sound. That soft parting, that breath of the edge through the paper that harms nothing beneath it. We have it in our archive now, a recording, played at the start of every assessment the conquered conducts, on every vessel, before every young world is judged. Before we measure a species' weapons, we play, for ourselves, the sound of a blade choosing not to kill. So that we remember what we almost forgot, in our great age and our great wisdom and our great and terrible confidence, that the most dangerous thing in any room is also, always, the thing most capable of mercy, and that you cannot tell the soul of a people by what they are able to destroy. You can only tell it by what they are able to destroy and spare. The girl is an old woman now, by the counting of her kind. The smith is long gone. He lived 3 more years after that day, and I am told he relit his forge one final time and made one more blade, and gave it to no one, and that it too has kept its promise. The sword from the exhibition hall hangs in a quiet place on their world, behind glass, with the black cloth folded beside it, and a small brown finch. Not the same one, they do not live so long, but always one. They have made it a custom, sits on a perch nearby, and is never harmed. And I am still an archivist, and I still keep the entry, and I still cannot make it lie flat. Every time I try to file it away, I hear the sound, the breath of the edge, the 2 pale halves of paper drifting down on either side of a heartbeat that goes on beating, and then the other sound, the one beneath it. The one I did not have ears for that day, and have grown them for since, the sound of a strong thing choosing to be gentle, the sound of asterisk able to, and not. We had crossed the stars to find out whether they were dangerous. They were, they are. A child showed us exactly how dangerous, knelt down in the proof of it, and laid the danger on the floor with her empty hands turned up. That is the entry. I have rewritten it for the last time. I will not touch it again. But I keep the cloth folded on my own shelf now, the way they do, a small black square beside the work of my long life. And on the days when I am most certain that I understand the universe, and an archivist of my years is certain very often, it is the disease of our profession, I take it down and I hold it. And I remember a girl in the dark who could not see us, bowing to a bird, and I put my certainty away again, where it belongs, able to and not.